Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, dear. All right. So you remember last week we spoke about how you can control where the eye moves within the image. And the four things you use are light, color, contrast, and number 4 was a person or a face. All right. So in this instance, we've got the color doing similar things to what we did last week, because we had this band across the bottom and the sky's been muted tonally. But what I want to show you is the effect of color. All right. So if we go to the color gradient and I turn the saturation right down on the color gradient. Oh, wrong one. Sorry. So we go hue and saturation. So if I desaturate, so at the moment, what's the brightest? It's the yellow, isn't it? So if I desaturate it, look what happens. So tonally, the blue and the yellow are exactly the same. All right. But look what color does. All right. As soon as I bring color into it, even though they're exactly the same tone, the yellow pops off the page. Isn't that interesting? So if I go back to my picture here, then looking at this image, you can then see that the sky and the yellow are exactly the same tonal range. All right? I can show that to you by turning it black and white. So when we look at those colors together in black and white, you can see they're the same gray. So that's the impact that color can have on an image, about sending things visually forward, things visually back, and you can see what that does. You know? So with that in mind, let's go and jump into our image, because we're going to use some of that information when we're starting to look at our picture of Jokulsarlon. So hopefully that's what you've all got, and I didn't send you a different picture. This was taken, for those who haven't been to Iceland, behind me is a 2-lane highway, and on the other side of the 2-lane highway there's a lagoon. It's more like a lake, and the glacier carves into the lake, and then the icebergs float down the river, which is to the right in this picture, out to sea, and then the small ones get washed back onto the beach. Right? And when we talk about small ones, this one on the left here is probably about the size of a VW. All right. So this one here is probably about 6 foot high and about 12 foot long. So it's sort of VW size. And when you're photographing these things, it's a little bit dangerous because they move. All right. So as the waves come in, if you're standing there taking your picture of this iceberg and the wave washes in, it can float towards you, and then you can have icebergs that are floating behind you. So you might be standing somewhere here and taking the picture, and this one floats in behind you. And so it's all, you really need to shoot it in pairs so that you've got someone watching the ocean and someone watching the iceberg movement if you want to take these sorts of photos. So here we've got, a bit like last week, we've got a very bright sky up on the right. We've got the light sort of washing in around on the iceberg there. We've got some nice detail on the left here with the icebergs and the clouds, but everything's got this blue haze. And when you're trying to isolate what the blue is, this blue is usually cyan. All right, so as some of you know, I hate cyan because of what it does. So if I go to my hue and saturation slider, up here where it says master, I can have a look at the channels. And in here, if I click cyan and I desaturate cyan, you can see that most of the image is actually cyan. So the sky is cyan, the blue in the icebergs is cyan, and all the wash is essentially blue from the sky, just bluing up the scene. So this is a reasonably difficult one to separate, because the icebergs themselves do have that blue about them, but the water wasn't. So when you're standing there again, the the subtlety and beauty of your eye is that it can tell. It's got a way of clarifying the colors. So this white was all very nice, and the foam that was washing was all very white. The icebergs were blue. The sky was probably a little bit more yellow. So the cyan is actually, if you like, contaminating the image, because it's changing all these colors which weren't there. So there again, the camera isn't as sensitive as the eye. So we've got a little bit of a job in managing the color in the image to get it back to something like we actually saw. And we've also got the issue of the brightness of the sky here, which tends to be distracting. So if I, for instance, just increase the size of the image so it gets its own little mask, and I move to the left, you can see if I'm looking at the image there that the image is reasonably well balanced, because the sky, similarly to what if we quickly jump back, the sky tonally in this image, it's pretty much the same left to right. It's not bright on the right or bright on the left. So what Arthur does in his paintings is he tends to take the sky out of the action by not only dropping it back tonally, but also he doesn't have much variation from left to right. So he does have the clouds and he's got the blue sky, and there's a transition there visually, but there's not a change in brightness. Right? So when we're looking at this image, we do have the change of brightness. So we need to deal with this bit of the sky because it distracts the eye. And when I'm looking at the icebergs here, I don't want my eye being distracted and going up and looking at the sky, because the story here is the icebergs. All right, so we've got to manage the eye within the view, so we keep it on the subject, and the subject here is icebergs and the flow of the water in the foreground. So we'll get rid of that hue and saturation layer. So Control J, and I make a copy, or Command J if you're on a Mac. We make a copy of the file, and then what I'm going to do here, I've just got a problem with the zoom controls because they tend to be hiding the screen a little bit. So let me just play around with the size of my screen here so I'm not battling with the zoom controls. All right, so that's okay for me. All right, and then we will go to up to Filter and Camera Raw. And we'll take the image into Camera Raw and see what we can do with it in Camera Raw. So last week, which we looked at, a really simple thing to do is just to hit Auto and see what Camera Raw thinks it should do. Right, and effectively all it's done is darken it. So we'll have a look at the basics in here. Click that down arrow and have a look at the basics, and you see where it's dropped back the highlights, it's pushed up the contrast a little bit, raised the shadows a bit, darkened the blacks, and added a little bit of vibrance. But apart from that, it's left most of it alone. So all I've really got is a darker version of the image. It hasn't tried to play with, you can see with the temperature, absolutely zero. So it hasn't changed the blue or yellow slider, hasn't changed the green to mauve slider. All of that is exactly the same. So what I might do is I'll grab the highlight slider and just retrieve as much detail in the sky as I can, because I think we've got some burning, a bit burnt out there. We've got it just pure white up in the sky there. So we'll try and grab that back a bit. And that's about all I'll do at this stage. So if I tried the dehaze, you'll see all it's really doing is darkening the blues. So it doesn't do too much for me, and I can do that in Photoshop. So I'll just leave that alone because we want to try and manage the blue a bit. So I'll click OK. And that little change will then come into Photoshop. So we might repeat again the same technique we used last week, which was to break the image up into foreground, midground, background, and just play with the tones and the colors and see what that does to the image. So we'll do that as a quick exercise and won't be too detailed. So I click on my little selection tool here up on the left, and I want a plus because I'm going to add something. You'll see that I've got the plus inside the circle, and if I use my square brackets to the right of the P, then I can, if I tap the right-hand bracket, it opens it bigger, and if I tap the left-hand one, it makes it smaller. Usually, the smaller it is, the more accurate the selection. So we'll choose something about that sort of size, and that's really just playing with it. And you just click and hold on the left there, and then the marching ants appear, and then we can just roughly drag that. It's going to make a bit of a mess here because the blue is challenging the Photoshop to actually find where the edge is because there's so much blue. Right, so we'll do that, and then we will use them. We'll come up here to the minus up on the top left, and then we can have a go at pushing that boundary back a little bit. And there again, we're only going to do this roughly because we're going to be breaking it into just its various areas, and we can modify the mask that we're going to come up with. All right, so we'll just push this back a little bit here, and maybe come across there, get rid of those marching ants. All right, so we'll get that first selection there, and I come down to my half black, half white control down here, click on it, and I'll put that in. If I click on brightness and contrast, it will put that selection in brightness and contrast. Black on the bottom, white on the top, white's the selection, black's what isn't. And if we just quickly have a look at that, on the left is the brightness and contrast control, which sits up in the next column. And I can just adjust the brightness of the sky just with that control. So you can see immediately, a bit like with the same image we looked at last week, that if we tonally change the sky, it brings the subject, the sky drops out of the equation. It's not as bright, and your eye no longer looks to the distance of where the sky is, but starts picking up something that's brighter, more bright in the foreground. So that's a great tool for just concentrating where the eye is going. So you can turn it into midnight with the floodlights on. You can do what you like, but for this exercise, we're just going to knock it back a bit because what we're trying to do is emphasize just the icebergs in the foreground. And I'll do the same exercise again with the midground. So we come up here and we've got our selection. We'll do a plus. I'll just drag through the middle here. It's going to be a bit easier to find because I've now darkened the background, so it can now tell where the border is. Oh, lost it there, but we'll tidy that up. And we'll kind of call, we might knock that back a little bit. Usually try to find transition points. So where the transitions happen, where you can change tones and things, is a good place to do it. So we'll just quickly knock these back. There again, I'll come down here, bottom right-hand corner, I'll choose brightness and contrast, put that selection in that layer, and then I've got control of the midground to brighten and darken the icebergs. And then I'll do the same again. I'll choose the plus. I'll come down here and I will just put this bit of area in the foreground just into its own separate layer. So I can play around with it. And we're going to put that into brightness and contrast as well. And there again, you can see that I can play around with that selection. So they're quick selections. So if you're wanting to do this more accurately, if we revisit this selection here, and I'll just show you on this one, just so that you can see what to do. But for the speed of the exercise, that's why I've kept it reasonably general. But if I was wanting to do this a little bit more accurately and get a better sky selection, for instance, we go through the same process which we did before of running the marching ants around and getting a general sort of selection and getting it generally right. Right, so something like that. And instead of going directly down to one of these layers on the bottom right, up the top here, I would I would, you've just got to make sure you're on the right layer. I would go select and mask. All right, and when I hit select and mask, it shows you the masking line. All right, and then at this point, I can adjust the mask and make it more accurate. So this little tool here enables me to refine the edge. You can see there it says refine edge brush tool. All right. So if I zoom in a little bit to do this, because you need to see the details, so Control plus or Command plus will zoom me in. And then if I hit the space bar, the hand comes up and I can drag and move the image around. Right? So what I can do when I'm at this sort of size is I hit my square brackets and make this thing a little bit bigger. And I can, if I hold down as I move along, what will happen is that hard edge will get feathered, and I can actually choose to pick up, where the mask is missed. All right, so I might come up here and I'll drag this across, and I'll pick up the edge of the iceberg. I will tidy up the edge there where it hasn't worked so well. I'll pick up this little bit of white on the top. So I'll then, down here we want to get rid of this bit, which it's not going to play around with. Oh, here we go. It's a bit of a finicky tool, but it enables you to come along and just tidy up that edge so that your mask is a lot sharper and you can leave things out. All right, so you can see it's having a bit of trouble because everything's blue. That cyan is over everything, and to actually do this well, you have to spend a bit of time. So the next one down is the brush tool. So I can physically brush the red away, or the mask away. All right, so if I click on the brush tool, I can come along, it's gone off again. Click on the brush tool, that looks better. Just increase the size a bit. I can actually physically just get rid of the mask if I want to. I can actually brush it off. So if Photoshop is having trouble, I can come in here and I can get rid of the mask just using the brush tool. If I've taken some off, which I didn't mean to, I can go to the minus and I can actually add the mask using the minus, take it away with so I can get rid of those things. So if I had a bit of time, I would go around and I just spend time with my brush, and I would actually tidy up some of these spots where the mask has not done the proper, the quick mask hasn't worked too well, and I would go around and I tidy up all these mask edges. All right, so that's how you would make that mask a little bit more accurate. We might just quickly tidy up a couple of these so we get a reasonable edge. So if I run my refine edge tool along here, we'll just tidy up a little bit of this. We can see that if you're thinking about the program, you've got the blue of the ice and the blue of the water, and it's having trouble finding where the definition is between the two. So we've set it a bit of a hard task, but it's, we'll just tidy up this edge. Come down here, tidy up the edge of the iceberg, and just give it a little bit more of a feather into the water. And Control 0, and we've got it back to the full screen. And I've got probably a little bit more of an accurate mask. So it's not looking too flash over here. So we might just, for this exercise, just quickly paint that in, so at least we've got something that looks a little bit like what it's meant to be. All right, so we can happily just paint the mask in. All right, so we've got our mask using a different technique, and then down the bottom right here, I go OK, and I accept the mask, and the marching ants are now a little bit more defined. And now at this point, I can then choose the brightness and contrast and put it in its own layer, and this mask will then be, you can see if we control the brightness and contrast, that edge is now a lot better, and we get a more accurate transition between the two. So that's how you would do a more accurate version of what we're doing And I think you can appreciate what we're just trying to do is show you in principle what you might do. So I'll drag that other mask off the page, get rid of it. And I'll turn all these on. So we've got, a bit like last week, we've got the ability to control the brightness and brightness and contrast in each of these three areas. And I think you can probably agree that what we would do is probably, I think darkening the background is probably a good one because it takes it out of the out of play. All right. Now, one of the things you can do is you can see as I darken, if you look at the yellows in the sky, as I darken, the yellow becomes more intense. All right. So it's actually, as it's darkening, it's increasing the saturation of the color. Up here, we've got normal mode. If I was to choose, if I click on that, you can see that we've got lots of different options in here. And at the very bottom, I've got luminosity. So if I select luminosity, then look what happens when I do that again, is it only plays with the brightness. It doesn't actually change the color as much, right? You can see there where the yellow is not nearly as saturated using luminosity only. So I might choose in this instance, because the colors are so subtle, I don't really want to crank up the yellow because then my eye is going to be brought to the yellow. So if we use the lesson of Arthur's picture before, my eye is going to be drawn to the yellow more than the blue if they're both the same tonal range. So I'll tend to drop that. Let's pick a spot somewhere there, but we're using luminosity, not just normal. All right, and that's the way that I'm controlling the color a little bit in that background. And then I might also do the same in the foreground, where I don't want to change the color much, but I just want to change the brightness. So in here, I will choose luminosity again, and I will tone down the brightness. All right, so there again, I'm starting to get more of the black sand sort of glowing through the water there. All right, and you can see now I've done that, I can kind of see the edge of where the mask was. So I can come along and choose that mask, and you can see where white is what you see and black is what you don't see. And I can make that edge a little bit softer. So I come across on the left and I choose a pen, and I come down here and I choose black. And with my brush, with my square brackets, I will, so up the top for the brush, I would have chosen a hardness of 0, got an opacity of 30 and a flow of 50. And with my square brackets, I can make the circle bigger and smaller. And then what I'll do is I'll come along and I'll just adjust that edge. And you can... doing anything? I'm doing it on the wrong one. Let me have a look. That's the one. Maybe it's the midground one. Yeah, that's it. So we'll do it on the midground one. You can see where that line is a bit sharp. So we'll choose that mask there, the midground one. And if I brush there, you can see we get rid of that hard line that's in between the two mask areas. And that just softens that edge and enables that to be drawn in. The eye gets not distracted by those little sharp edges. And we can do the same with the background one. So if we select this mask up here, you can see up here it's a bit hard. So there again, I might, no, it's the wrong one. That one, the sky. And you can see we can just sort of soften the transition there. So it's not just so hard. So we come along with the, just grabbing those. And we can tidy that up. So to get rid of those lines, we get view, clear guides, and that gets those off the page. All right, so that just tidies up the edge of the mask a little bit. So immediately, just by darkening the background again and darkening the foreground, we've now got the iceberg jumping out at us. So if I turn those changes off, you can see where we've got bright sky and your eye tends to be drawn out to the sky. Darken the sky, darken the foreground, and then our subject being the icebergs are jumping happily out visually for us. So the next thing I would probably look at is just what the color is doing in the picture. So it's kind of still annoying me that the cyan is bluing up all this lovely white water here. So I might choose at this stage to maybe do something with it, because I don't mind the blue of the cyan in the ice, because that's pretty much like it was. And I might do something with the sky. So what I might do is I might desaturate the sky even further, so that this blue isn't up in the top here isn't so strong, and it's a little bit more subtle, and the yellow is more prominent. And then I might get rid of the blue in the foreground, and let's see what that does to the picture. So I've got these masks, which I have. So that one's the sky. So why don't I rename these? So if I double click on them, I can open up that, and I can type in and name that one sky. This one here is the midground. So I'll double click on that and call it midground. And this one here will have to be the foreground. Yep. So we'll double click on it and we'll rename it foreground. That way we can just keep track of what things are rather than trying to remember visually. So with the foreground one, you remember last week, I can come down here and I can select these controls here, and I can choose Hue and Saturation as an adjustment layer. Then if I go and look underneath here down the bottom, I've got this little square box with the arrow. So I click on it. And then everything I do now in this Hue and Saturation layer will only apply to the masked area below it. So I can desaturate the foreground using that. Why is that not getting rid of the blue? That's interesting. Let's have a look here at the master. So if we go to cyan, we get rid of the cyan, I still have blue there. We're having a little moment here with, let's get rid of that. I think Photoshop's having a moment. So let's do that again. We'll do a hue and saturation level, and we'll clip it down to the one below. And it is not doing it. Interesting.
Tim, I've been having the same problem over the last few weeks. I suspect it's a Photoshop bug.
Could be a bug. All right, so bear with me for 2 moments, because what we'll do is we'll close Photoshop and open it up again. And that usually fixes it. So just save the file. And we'll call it draft. I will close Photoshop. We'll wait for it to save.
Peter Kappelman, Tim.
Yep.
Peter says might be the blending mode, luminosity of the layer you're
still on
saturation to. Is it still on?
Hang on, we'll just let it.
No, it's on normal. It was on normal.
Yeah, it says it's on normal.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the layer
below is on luminosity. That shouldn't matter. You should still be able to adjust the color. So we'll just open and close and see if that helps.
Christine asked, don't you have to click on the middle of the mask?
Shouldn't need to. So let's just.
Well, the mask is outlined, so that's why it's the active ingredient there.
So let's just open it up again, and we will see if it's a Photoshop issue. All right, so let's have a look here and see what happens.
Yes, so
On normal.
you know, they were talking about moving to Japan for a couple of years, but of course not now. But they were thinking of
That is really strange. back. Here we go. All right, so sorry about that, but I just issued I updated Photoshop during the week, so obviously I think they've given us a bug. So thanks, Louise, for that one. So
sometimes it's nice for people to see somebody else having problems with it as well,
right.
rather than it being themselves. It's actually the program itself.
Yes, well, I've had quite a bit of frustration with that over the last about 3 weeks. So
right,
it must be the new version.
We're back in control. So hue and saturation, and I choose. So in here, I will choose cyan, because what I want to do is get rid of the cyans in the foreground. So you can see that if I slide that down, I'm now getting the lovely black sand with the white on it without the blue saturation in it. So let's wind that down. What's that going to be? Probably 50%. And that just takes a lot of the blue out of the equation in the foreground. Again, I might choose to just feather this edge a little bit, because the blue is we probably want to. So I've chosen the foreground. I've come across here. I've got a brush. I've got a black brush, because we've got a white area which we want to just tidy up the edge of. And I'll come along here and I'll just feather in the blue removal, or the cyan removal along the edge. And then I'll choose the sky. I'll do a similar thing with the sky. We're going to don't want another mask. Sorry about that. Someone having a chat in the background. So for the sky, we're going to choose a hue and saturation layer again. And we're going to come along here and clip that down to the sky. And hopefully I can, no, oh, there we go. It's not, it's not desaturating. All right. Thank you, Photoshop.
Tim, you've got the layers above that layer still showing.
That shouldn't matter.
It does.
See, if I turn those off, all it does is affect the foreground. All right, and if I've got this layer here, and I'm wanting to change the saturation, I should be able to do that, but it's not doing it. All right, so let's have a go at doing something globally instead and see if that works. So I'll turn all these back on. Let's just go for a hue and saturation layer on its own. Put that up the top. All right, and I can control the whole image, but I can't control the clipping. All right, so in desperation, what I will do is I'll come to the top and I'll desaturate the whole image, right? Because all I'm really wanting to do is affect the sky. And I'll just desaturate the sky to where I think it should be, which is kind of there. And with this mask, I will go Control or Command I, invert the mask so you can see that the effect isn't applying. I come across, choose a brush, and I'll go for a white brush because I've got a black background. And I will desaturate that blue manually rather than the clipping version. So there again, I think you can see that by desaturating that blue, the blue of the iceberg stands out more. All right, so if I turn that back on, you can see that the blue in the sky and the icebergs is kind of similar, so our eye goes to both equally. And then by desaturating, the blue of the icebergs now stands out against a plainer background. And I might also just maybe desaturate a little bit around that edge, so the icebergs are sitting out nicely. And we'll just work on the sky. And then there again, I can come along here, desaturate the blue around the front. So just by looking at the image, if I turn all those adjustments off, you can see where we've started and where we've come to. So we've taken the sky out of dominance and recessed it by darkening it. And just by managing the blues, we're starting to get a little bit more control of the color in the image too, where we've left the blue in our subject and desaturated the area around it. So at this stage, having got it to there, I might actually have a look and see what a curves layer does. So if I come down to here and I choose my curves layer, if you remember last week up here, we've got white on the right, black on the left, our histogram in the middle, and this line through the middle, it gives us our curve adjustment. So I can grab it anywhere along, and I can choose to maybe grab it in the darks. So I can choose to selectively darken more than the brights. You can see the line, what it's affecting. And then I can choose to grab it here and then leave the lights alone. And that effectively is a contrast curve. So it's increasing the difference between the lights and the darks. So I've increased the contrast by doing that. And what I can do is, seeing it's an adjustment layer, I can invert it. So I can go Control or Command I, turn that off, and I can come along. I've got a black mask. I need a white brush, and I can actually brush some of that adjustment in selectively over the image and not apply it to the whole image. So I might just pick spots which I know which are going to crank up a little bit more contrast, a little bit more, and give us a little bit more of an effect. So if I turn that on and off, you can see I've just increased the contrast a little bit there through the middle, just to give some prominence to the blue of the icebergs. And similarly to last week, what I will possibly now do is be a little bit more selective with what I do to the icebergs. All right, so I could, for instance, come along with my quick selection tool, a bit like we did. I select plus because I want to add something. Seeing we're nice and close, I can reduce the size of this thing, and I can do a little bit of a selection along this iceberg. Just knock that back, maybe something like that. And if I hit the space bar, the hand pops up and I can drag across, and I can keep on choosing my selection with a plus. I might choose a little bit here, might choose a little bit here. I really want to crank up the brightness of this guy because he's like a little crystal in the foreground. And I can just do a little bit of an adjustment here for the bits I don't want to brighten up. And I'll be adjusting this later, but that just gives me a general sort of effect. So Control minus to go back. And then if I want to bring a little bit more light into those, I'll go into a brightness and contrast layer. And then I can just brighten the light just on those icebergs a bit. So I can just brighten those up a little bit, and just where it's a bit raggedy on the edge, I can come along here with my brush, turn it to a black one, and I can Control plus, zoom in a little bit, using the square brackets, the left-hand bracket. I can come along here with my black brush and just tidy up those edges where it doesn't look so natural, and blend those edges in, just along the edges of those ice. But now that I've got that adjustment, I can then go to a white brush. So for a shortcut, if I go X, it changes to a white brush, and I can come along here and I can actually brush some of the brightness in. All right, so I can do exactly the same. So now that I know it's about the right brightness, I can come along and just brighten up the tips of a few of these bits of the iceberg along here. And maybe do the same in the background here. I can brighten that up, brighten this guy up a little bit. You can see it's a very subtle adjustment, but it's all you really need to start differentiating. And we can give this guy a little bit more action because he's like this beautiful little crystal in the foreground. And we've done a little bit of a brightening through there. All right, so Control minus to zoom out a bit. And if I turn that on and off, you can see that it's a very subtle one, but it just gives that last little bit of a pop to the top of the icebergs, just to give them a little bit more of a visual prominence. So that's kind of where we might get to. It's looking a little bit dark in the shadows, maybe, and we could brighten up a few bits. So let's have a look at how we might do that. So you remember last week that we can combine all those changes into one adjustment layer. And that's with a Control-Alt-Shift-E. And I don't know why they don't have a simpler version. I think that's a Command-Alt-Shift-E in a Mac. And then what it's done is it's created a new layer with all those adjustments in it. All right. And then now that I've got that, I can come back up to Filter, to Camera Raw, and I can revisit the shadows. So we can open up, and it opens up with, you can see, because it's a new file of, essentially for Camera Raw, everything's at 0. Right. So now I can come in and I can brighten those shadows a little bit. So the bit where it's starting a little bit murky and a little bit muddy, I can retrieve the shadows. I can still muck around with the highlights a little bit. So I might actually brighten the highlights just so we're getting a little bit. So I've brightened the highlights, drawn the shadows right out. And it's at this stage where I might start playing with the texture. All right. So if I crank up the texture, you can see what it does in the foreground there. It's actually, it's almost like a sharpening tool, isn't it? So I can crank up texture and I can crank up clarity. And you can see that that's really crunches up the icebergs nicely and gives a bit more detail. And I might increase a bit of vibrance. So we just got a little bit more color in the image there. Right? So I'll do that adjustment. I can even, if I wanted to, come up and warm the image up a little bit, just a touch, just so I get a little bit more warmth in the foreground. So it's not very much, a +5 maybe. And click OK. And it applies all those changes in Camera Raw. And you can see just the difference that is made just looking at the iceberg and this area in the foreground, just by bringing those shadows back up. That's just, it's brought a bit of the color from the background into the foreground. So we've got a nice band of the blue running through. It's given me a bit more detail in the shadows. And my eye is kind of quite happily sitting in the middle here, but I've still got this distraction up here where the sky is a little bit burnt out, and it'd be nice if I wasn't being distracted by that, and I wasn't being distracted by this little bit of iceberg on the right here. So what can I do? So now that I've got that layer, I'll do a Control-J and copy that so that if I need to, I can come back to that original layer. And I can come up to this little edit. So edit next to File, and I can go down to Transform. And when I get to Transform, I can come down to Warp. All right, so I now have put these little blue control points around the edge of the picture. And if I grab hold of one of those, I can actually drag the picture around. Yeah? So it gives me the ability to warp the image. So I can actually play around a bit with what the view from my camera might be. So I might, for instance, if I want to get a little bit more detail for the foreground, I might drag these down a bit here. So I'm getting into the image a little bit quicker rather than having to wait to get into the image. Or I might, maybe somewhere there and this. And if I want for composition in this corner, if I want to get this little flow of the water coming right out of the corner, then I can move this around and make sure that that's coming directly out of the corner there, tidy him up there. And if I want to over here, I can actually drag the image a little bit and actually get rid of that little bit of iceberg. All right. Or if I don't want that rock there, I can drag this down a little bit and I can get rid of the rock. And I can start playing around with this too. So if I want the cloud coming directly out of the corner, I can manipulate the image around a little bit. I can actually click on the image and actually drag the image in the middle too. So I can actually start modifying my composition a little bit just to fine tune it, tidy it up so that the things that I want to achieve are not limited by what the camera's captured. So if I was to do something like that, and I come up here and I click the tick for OK, thank you very much. And then I compare the before and after. You can see that I've got rid of a lot of distractions by doing that. I've got rid of the distraction of the iceberg on the right here, the distance here, which I'm feeling a little bit remote. I'm now a little bit more engaged with the subject because I'm up a little bit closer. So I've been able to tidy up a few little things that aren't fantastic in the image by using that warp tool. And I'll show you one other little trick for maybe getting rid of this up here. So if I make another copy of that layer, if I just stamp all that up, so I've got a new layer to work on, I can play around with the sky. So I can, up on the left here, we've got the Marquee Tool, the square Marquee Tool, rather than the other selection tool. And if I click and hold, it starts the marching ants. And if I drag my mouse across, it will define an area for me. And why don't we choose the whole sky? And having chosen the whole sky with that selection, if I right click, it has the option of layer via copy. All right, so what it's going to do is it's going to take that selection, put it in a new layer as a copy of the layer. So I choose that as layer via copy, and you can see up the top there that it's put the sky in a separate layer. So if I turn that on and off, the sky is underneath and it's got a copy of it on top, so you don't see any difference. But at this stage, if I go Control T for transform, you can see those little control points again pop up on the selection that I've made. And I, for instance, could, if I wanted to, come and make a copy of the sky that I've got on the side there, place it over here, and I can grab these control points and I can play around with what the sky is doing. All right, so we might let's do, say, something a bit like that. And if I hold control at the same time as I'm moving, I can actually twist and distort it. So we don't want it looking like the other clouds. So we kind of twist and move it around a little bit. All right. So I've used a bit of the sky to place over the other sky. So I go tick, I'll take that very much. And then with this, this layer that I have, if I choose this little flag, the white box with the circle in it, it gives me a control of that. All right, so I've got this white mask, if you like. So on my white mask, if I come over and I choose a black brush, I can actually brush out some of that effect. All right, so if I come across here with my brush, I can then come here and I can brush out the bits that I don't want, blend that selection into the sky. Like that. And I have fixed my my burnt out sky. All right, so if I turn that on and off, I've gone from a reasonably distracting bit of sky to a bit of sky that's nondescript and doesn't compete with the rest of the image. And because it's part of the existing sky, it will blend in. All right, it's got the same color, it's got the same cloud patterns, and it's as if I've just stood to the left a bit and changed my viewing angle and changed how the sky gets blended in. So that's how you can use parts of your image to fix up other bits, right? So here I am, I've fixed that sort of brightness of the sky. Right? So as a final thing, what I might do is often if you put a filter over the whole thing, it ties it all together. So you've actually got that option down here. You've got photo filter. All right, so if I select photo filter, by default, it's usually a warming filter. But if you click on this little thing on the side here, you've got the option of a cooling filter. You know, you can go the hard blues, you can do a deep emerald. So you've got different effects that you can apply to the whole image, but you can see that by applying the filter to the whole image, you tends to tie it all together a bit. So why don't we go for the warming one, because it does some nice things to the sky and nice things to the foreground. And if I choose the difference there, so what I might still do is that even though that filter is applied nicely to the sky and warmed up the foreground, I don't kind of like how it's put yellow haze on my nice blue icebergs. So it's a white filter. I can come across here and select the black brush, and I can actually brush that out on the icebergs. So I can come across here and I can just slightly brush across the icebergs and get rid of the yellowing filter off the icebergs and retain the blue in there. But what it's done is it's tied the background and the sky together. So if I turn that on and off, you can see the difference where it's just warmed up and actually brought the sky forward again. So if we go back to our beginning image, that's where we've started. And with those few adjustments, we've been able to completely change the way that the light's interacting with our subject. We've got a nice, crystal glow of this little iceberg in the foreground. We're getting more of a sense of the black sand that the water's running over. We've got rid of the distraction up on the top right here, and we've made the icebergs more prominent because they're the subject of our photo. So there we go. Another image. So that's our hour. So if you like, we can, like we did last week, chat further, ask questions, or go and get a glass of red and off the bed. So up to you as to what you'd like to do. But as you can see, there's simple little adjustments that make a big change to the way that your eye actually runs over the image. Because it's been a rather quick exercise, the edges are a little bit rough and ready and the transition's a bit rough and ready. So I would take my time doing that much more accurately if it was something I was working on. But I think it's just to demonstrate the principle of just how you can very quickly manipulate and change just by breaking a landscape into foreground, midground, background on its basics, play around with the brightness and darkness. So it just gives you a method of where you start with your image. And then as you get better with that, then you will, there's some other controls we can show you, which are much more fine-tuned. You can create masks by color. You can create masks by luminosity, and then you can modify color and all the other adjustments with those masks as well. So we've been creating masks from scratch, but there's other ways of doing it. Let me just quickly show you one, and just to blow your socks off, to show you what Photoshop can do. So let me just share the screen again. I'll show you how quickly you can create a mask. So here we have our image, and we've got the option with these controls down here we've got solid color, we've got the brightness, we've got vibrance. We've got this little thing here called channel mixer. All right. So if I'm just looking at the image and I want to select something in the image, if I was to select blue, then that's going to select some blues and it won't select the yellows. All right. So I've got a way where I can make a selection based on color, or I can select the yellows. So I'll show you a luminosity mask. It's just I've actually got these built in as an action. So if I choose just to choose to affect the light areas in the picture, I can create, if you have a look at the very top here, it creates a luminosity mask. It creates a mask based on brightness. All right, so if in the middle of this, you can see that what it's not adjusting the whole picture, it's only adjusting the lights in the mask, because if you look at the mask, it's got blacks to whites to, so it's a picture of, I think if I go, oh, quick, we can see it. There we go. So that's actually the mask. All right. So it's a reflection of the image. So when it applies the adjustments, it applies it based on luminosity. I can do the same by color. Right, so let me. So if I come down and I choose my channel mixer, up here in the channel mixer, I've got this second control. If I click on it, you can see that it pops up with a layer mask. I can change density and feather, but then I've got these little three things. I can go by color range. So if I click color range, I can choose with my little picker by color. So if I pick the blue, you can see what's happening with the mask here. So it's only selecting the blue. And fuzziness and range, fuzziness changes the blue, all right? So the blue I've selected, if I increase fuzziness, it selects more blues. And if I select range as the distance from away where I clicked, all right? So if I increase range, it's picking up those other icebergs. And if I decrease fuzziness, it goes to the selection of just those blues. All right, so I've now got a selection you can see in that mask of just the blues. So if I select OK, I now have a mask in there. I can come along here and choose a brightness and contrast layer, and then I can drag that mask in the brightness and contrast layer. And then I can then change the brightness of just the blue, all right? So that I've got control by color, all right? So that if you've got so that would be another way that I could actually selectively mask and adjust the image. So there's all these cool little tricks when you start playing with Photoshop where you can actually be much more accurate. And I think that's the story on Photoshop, where instead of creating big, broad radial masks and then dabbing around and playing with them, and sometimes it overlaps the edge and you get a halo around something. Or so using these techniques, you can be a lot more accurate, and because you can be more accurate, then you're going to have a much curated result, aren't you? It's going to be much crisper, sharper, brighter. Because you've got much more choice in what you're controlling, rather than just a general broad brush approach, which you do with general masking. So I think it's more, once you see what you can achieve, then you can then see why you'd like to spend time sort of playing around with these masks with more accuracy, because you get so much control on your image, and you can completely change the way that you engage with it. So there we go. Hope that's been entertaining for some, informative for others, visionary for some who haven't used Photoshop.
And been illuminating for some as well.
Illuminating.
Yeah. There you go.
And challenging for others.
That's right. And that's why I've tried to keep it pretty simple. Like last week, we just saw where just with half a dozen changes, because Photoshop's as with any software, you open the software and you think, well, where do I start? What do I do? But if you've got a little bit of a workflow sorted out at the beginning, at least you can get in there and start playing and learning. And once you're actually using it, then you can ask specific questions. All right, you then say, well, this does this. I'd really like to do that. How do I do that? All right, and then it's a small question you're asking, rather than the whole. Rather than having a flood pour on you, you can take it at trickles. So that's the idea with these sessions, where it just gives you a little bit of an introduction and familiarity with Photoshop. So then that will give you a little bit more comfort in when you pick it up or open it, that you actually know what you're doing, or you've got some idea about how to use the controls and things that you might be able to achieve. So it's also, if you're not used to processing your images, it's also trying to give you a little bit of an idea of where your unprocessed image might go, because just taking the photo straight out of camera, that's only part of the job. All right. you got to do the post-processing to actually bring it to its fullness, right? Because the camera can't capture what your eye sees, so you've got to adjust the image that comes out of the camera to at least get it back to what your eye sees, all right? And to do that, the only way to do it is to post-process. So once you're playing with it, you've got, you know, once you got through your mind that, yes, I have to post-process, then that frees you to then start looking at what other things you might do to it to enhance it even further. So, you know, the old dodging and burning, that's post-processing. You did that in the darkroom. You do it in your digital darkroom. So, you know, you wouldn't, if everyone was back in film days and we were going along to Camera Club and you were going to present your film image, your black and white film shot, if you didn't dodge and burn, you're nuts, all right, because you want to increase the darks, you want to increase the brights, you want to get that contrast. So post-processing is part of photography, always has been, because you want to do some enhancements so that the image pops. And at its simplest, dodging and burning, that is post-processing. And all we're doing is something similar in the digital darkroom, but a lot more control. So yeah, it's just I think it's a lot of fun, because once the blinkers go off, you go, oh, look at that. Yep, let's have a go at this. It's you know, it's part of the creative process. That's what it's for. It's meant to be, you know, your images are there to challenge, to take you to different places, you know, you've got to have the wow factor in them. Why have an image that doesn't have a wow factor? You know?
Do you know of a list of keyboard shortcuts? Have you got one particularly, or is Google your friend in this instance? This is what somebody is asking. I don't think you keep one, do you?
Yeah, I just tend to, you tend to pick it up as you go along, but I could produce one. So it would be pretty easy to put them together, but it depends how you learn. So some people are great at abstract thinking, being told something, off they go and do it. Other people have to sort of sit and learn and do, and you learn by the doing. So often, you know, just working with an image, you learn the shortcuts and what you use, and you associate the shortcut with the action. And some people find that easier.
She came
so
and
it
stood.
just depends on.
I kept on looking at the chair, looking at me, looking at the chair.
What have you got going on there, Robin?
The dog is on the chair. Sorry, she's supposed to be on the ground, but she's on the chair because she's old and she's got old bones. Yep. Yeah.
What I thought we could do, so we're back to Tuesdays next week. So the rest of so depending on however lockdown is, Tuesdays are pretty clear now. So I did a presentation last night, which is why we couldn't do last night. But back to Tuesday, and I thought next Tuesday we might have a look at a little bit more of that way that you can manipulate and stretch and change your image. All right, so just what we did there with fixing up the sky and changing the foreground. Essentially, that in its own is kind of like changing your lens selection after you've taken the shot. All right, so you get back home and you've taken your photo with your 70 to 200, and you think, oh, gee, I should have probably used the 24 to 70, and you can do that. All right, you can change the way the image reads. You can open it up. You can do those adjustments. So just like you can do post-processing to compensate for the light, you can do stretching and warping to compensate for the inadequacies of your lens selection. So we can maybe have a play with that, and I can show you just what's possible, and then you'll all be wanting to start warping and twisting and manipulating your images. And then the one after that, I thought we might have a look at blending some images. So maybe taking two images, putting them together, choosing the best out of two shots. So you might have stood there at the rock pool, shooting away at your sunrise, and you've got some fantastic flow in one shot, but the sky's no good, and you've got a fantastic sky in another shot. And we'll just show you how to put the two of those together, so that you might have a series of images, and then you can select the best out of the series and put the best together come up with something that probably better represents the experience that you had. So, so that's kind of where we're going. Just little short, sharp, snappy bits, so you get a little bit of a feel, and you get a little bit more confidence about what you can and what you might want to do in Photoshop, and just where you might like to take your images. So
there you go. People like the idea of a blending workshop.
Blending workshop.
Yeah. We might wrap it up there for the night, I think.
Yep. So thanks for coming along.
Thanks for coming back, everyone.
Thank you, Tim.
It was fantastic.
Thank
Everyone's
you
now
guys
on
very
email
much.
list, so I'll just assume you want to come next week, and I'll send everyone an email.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks so much.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Tim.
Okay.
Cheers, guys.
Bye.
Thank you,
Thanks
Ruth.
a lot.
Bye.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Val.
Bye.
Bye, Margot.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks for coming.
Hello, Val. Hello, Margot. Yes.
Bye, Tim.